Well, let me ask about another band from my youth that I loved and still love, Led Zeppelin. And we talked about this before we started because, we've talked mostly not about the law so far on this episode, but you have a chapter in the book called Thou Shalt Not Steal. And that has been something that's come up often and sometimes with great, coverage in the news where songs are alleged to have been taken from another song. And of course, this is a classic era of music. So there's, you could say that if there's an opportunity for a song to be borrowed from, and this is before the whole era of sampling and rap music and all, but there's some great stories about songs that were felt to have been improperly borrowed or excessively borrowed from other songs. And Led Zeppelin has a real place in kind of that history too.
And you got to love the word borrowing, which is the best word to use, I guess. There is a chapter that, and Led Zeppelin in particular, seems to have been the subject of a disproportionate number of theft or borrowing accusations by numerous artists. And the most famous one, which was actually in the news recently, was that the introduction to Stairway to Heaven, they plagiarized that from a group called Taurus, headed by a guy named Randy California. And in just last year, in 2016, he filed a lawsuit saying that the intro, that memorable intro to Stairway to Heaven, was plagiarized from his song. The group is called Spirit, actually. The song was called Taurus, the group is called Spirit. Nobody really remembers them today except for this.
Right.
And if you listen to the go on YouTube. If you listen to the first 45 seconds of this song, Taurus by Spirit, it's almost note for note the same as the intro to Stairway to Heaven. You never even know you're listening to two different songs. I mean, they sound virtually identical. And the jury held for Led Zeppelin. And you might say, like, how could this be? How could they do that? Well, as it happened, the Led Zeppelin's lawyers filed a motion to not allow the actual recordings of the two songs to be played side by side during the trial. And instead, they said, let's have a live guitarist come in and play the intro to the two songs. Well, it's not the same thing, just having somebody come in and plucking some acoustic guitar, if you actually hear the two recorded soundtracks side by side.
Wow.
And they also were not allowed to introduce evidence of all the other evidence of theft, some of which had been proven by Led Zeppelin. So that didn't come into the trial anyway either. So the jury held in favor of Led Zeppelin. But there's a number of songs where they have been accused of borrowing from other songs. But perhaps the most famous song involving sort of the theft or borrowing issue is when George Harrison was accused of stealing riffs from He's So Fine by the Chiffons, which then made their way into My Sweet Lord. And George Harrison lost that, and the judge held that while it may have been subconscious on his part, there nevertheless was enough of a similarity that he was held to have plagiarized My Sweet Lord.
And there was another one recently too. Was it the song "Blurred Lines" that that was thought to have been borrowed from? Was it Marvin Gaye or Marvin Gaye's song?
Yes.
And I remember hearing that and thinking how similar those sounded. And George Harrison obviously lost his case. I have to say, when the now I was a big Led Zeppelin fan back in my youth, and of course I remember the day when a friend of mine who was a better guitar player than I was taught me how to play Stairway to Heaven on my guitar. So I know the song, and I listened to them you can't listen to them simultaneously, but I listened to one and then the other, right? I actually didn't think they sounded, I mean, you can hear hints of similarity, but I didn't think it sounded like note for note. I'm going to tell you what, to those listening to this podcast or those watching us on YouTube, comment in the area for comments and tell me whether you think, if you listen to them, whether you think they sound similar or not, or whether you think Led Zeppelin got away.
I wish there was some way of superimposing the songs onto this interview so people could hear it. It may not be the entire 45 seconds, but there's certainly...
I know it's the beginning.
It's certainly a chunk, and I think anybody hearing it would say, oh, that's the intro to Stairway to Heaven.